we have Mensa Dean, the Trace's Philadelphia staff writer, a Pulitzer finalist and veteran reporter, to speak with Lieutenant Governor Austin Davis. Lieutenant Governor Davis is the youngest person to be elected lieutenant governor in the country and the first Black lieutenant governor in Pennsylvania history. He leads the Shapiro administration's violence prevention efforts and has been working on gun violence prevention since his teenage years. Welcome, Lieutenant Governor Austin Davis.
Hello. Hello, Lieutenant Davis. How are you?
I'm doing well. It's great to be with you all this evening.
And hello, everybody. For those who don't know, my name is Mensa Dean. I am with the Trace, Philadelphia office. I've been with the Trace for 3 years. Some of you may know that I previously was at the Philadelphia Inquirer and Daily News. And so I'm continuing my work in reporting on public safety in a more intense way with the Trace. And so today we are honored to have the Lieutenant Governor with us at this very pivotal time in Philadelphia's history. We know that gun violence is down, and hope is up that Philadelphia is entering a new era of public safety and less violence. So it's very critical that we're focused on that, and that's why the Trace is here today. And so hopefully we can just get into some of the nitty-gritty and beyond the headlines to what it is that a lieutenant governor does with regard to keeping us safe. Now, I actually stumbled onto a factoid, I guess, that the average American does not even know who the Vice President of the United States is.
Yeah.
So
Even smaller percentage know who their lieutenant governor.
there you go.
Probably. Yeah.
So why don't you just briefly tell us who Austin Davis is?
Yeah, well, first, thank you all for having me here today, and thank you for the work that you're doing in Philadelphia and across Pennsylvania to make our communities safer. Gun violence is the very issue that brought me to public service. When I was 16 years old, I grew up in southwestern Pennsylvania, right outside of Pittsburgh, and gun violence came to my neighborhood, and that was the beginning of a long span of gun violence in the community that I grew up in. And I wanted to do something about it. So at 16 years old, I started a violence prevention organization and worked with other young people in the mayor and my community to help take on gun violence. And it has been the single thing that I have worked on throughout my entire career in public service. As a senior advisor in Allegheny County government, I helped launch the first Office of Gun Violence Prevention in the Allegheny County Health Department to look at gun violence from a public health perspective. As a state representative, I helped create the Violence Intervention and Prevention Grant Program, which was the Gun Violence Reduction Program initially, and helped seed that with a $5 million investment. And now as Lieutenant Governor, you asked, what do lieutenant governors do to help make our community safe? And the honest answer is, in the past, they didn't do much. But one of the first things that I wanted to do when I took on this role is I wanted to chair the Pennsylvania Commission on Crime and Delinquency, which is our public safety, criminal justice making arm of state government. And we dole out hundreds of millions of dollars in state and federal grants for violence intervention programs, for after-school programs, for law enforcement programs. And so when the governor and I got elected, that was the first thing that I asked for, because I wanted to continue to work on this issue. I wanted to continue to make Pennsylvania's communities safer. And I recognized at the time that this is going to be a pivotal issue. I think that we're going to have to deal with, not just through our first term, but really through our entire time as governor and lieutenant governor. And so that's really inspired me to do this work and to get involved. And I think we've made a tremendous amount of progress. But this is a moment where we can't afford to rest on our laurels, that we have to double down on the efforts that are working, and that we have to continue to make investments to make Pennsylvania's community safer.
Okay. Now, you sort of answer my next question but I'll ask it anyway. As Lieutenant Governor, you wear a lot of hats. This is a big state, and there's a lot to do. So where precisely is the issue of gun violence and combating gun violence? Where does that sit on your to-do list?
Yeah, I will tell you, it is of the highest priority of my office and the work that I do. I would say it's the number one issue that I have worked on and that I continue to work on in my time as Lieutenant Governor. The governor and I, when we ran for office, we said that every Pennsylvania community should have that basic foundation of safety and security. And really, everything else we do doesn't matter if we're not meeting that basic need. And so for me, this is my number one issue that I've leaned into. We've done a tremendous amount of work from last year, or for the last 2 years, we doled out about $85 million in violence intervention and prevention dollars. I'm proud of the fact that during my time heading PCCD, we reestablished the Office of Gun Violence Prevention here in Pennsylvania, and that work is ongoing. We just are wrapping up a gun violence victims assessment need study across the Commonwealth to look at gaps in services for victims of gun violence in our communities. So this issue, I can't think of an issue that's of a higher priority for me and my office and our administration.
Okay. Now, twice you've mentioned the Pennsylvania Commission on Crime and Delinquency. So could you tell us more precisely what is that? And how does it practically get to the streets and to address gun violence?
How many community-based organizations are in the audience? If anybody, just raise your hand. Any of you ever been funded? Leave your hand up if you've been funded by PCCD in the past. So PCCD is really a large grant-making arm of state government. We dole out the violence intervention and grant programs. We invest in law enforcement in terms of retention and recruitment. Everything that happens from a public safety perspective, and in a lot of ways a criminal justice perspective, in state government happens at the Pennsylvania Commission on Crime and Delinquency. And so it's not a law enforcement agency. It is more of I would say, technical, data-driven agency that figures out how we can best address public safety, not just from a law enforcement perspective, but from a holistic perspective.
Okay. Now, obviously, there's been some uncertainty at the federal level with regard to funding. Has any of that uncertainty impacted the commission's ability to dole out these grants?
Yeah, we have seen, because of the uncertainty at the federal administration, we have seen some cuts into the violence intervention and prevention grant programs. But quite frankly, we have taken that charge as our responsibility to try to backfill some of those cuts, to continue to do the work that we've been doing, because we recognize this work is having a huge impact in making our community safer. So Governor Shapiro and I are committed to this work. We've doubled down on this work, regardless of the chaos that's coming out of Washington. We've said this work is important, and we're going to continue to fight to make investments. If you just look at the bipartisan state budget that we just enacted last week, I recognize it was a little later than many of us would have liked, but we got a 10% increase in our violence intervention and prevention grant dollars. Thank you for about, I think, $64 million that takes us up to. And I can tell you, for as long as the wait was to get that budget done, when you look at the values and the priorities that we got done, I think it was worth the wait. And to see those dollars getting driven out into our communities and actually having a real effect on the ground here in Philadelphia and across Pennsylvania is going to have a tremendous impact.
All right. Now, Lieutenant Governor Davis, Philadelphia, as has been mentioned here and in other places, has experienced a historic drop in gun violence. And I'm just curious, what do you think is most important in contributing to the drop in gun violence? And because I talk to different people, I get different answers. So I wonder, do you have a perspective on what's behind this and what needs to happen to keep it going?
Yeah, look, I think from the city level with Mayor Parker's administration to the state level with Governor Shapiro and I, we've been taking a comprehensive approach to violent crime in our communities. And that means We have to invest in community-based organizations that are doing the work every single day, violence interrupters that are doing the work to make our community safe. But we also have to invest in law enforcement to make sure that they have the resources that they need. We've invested a significant amount of money in retention and recruitment in police officers. But then you have to address the root causes of poverty, right? We have to create ladders of opportunity for folks to succeed. The best way to take a gun out of somebody's hand is to put a paycheck in it. And that means investing in a quality, making sure every young person has access to a quality education system. That means investing in workforce development programs. We have to recognize that we need to give young people multiple opportunities to succeed. If they want to go to college, that's great. We want to make sure it's affordable for them. But if they want to go to an apprenticeship program and join a union, we want to make sure that's an option for them as well. Or if they want to start a small business in our community, we want to make sure that's an option for them as well. So I think addressing those root causes of poverty, coupled with the community-based organizations, coupled with law enforcement, all of that is having a cumulative effect. And I think the drops in violent crime that we've been seeing in Philadelphia and across the Commonwealth. We have seen significant drops in places like York and Reading and Pittsburgh. And so this is something that's happening all across our Commonwealth.
Okay. Now, you mentioned that the Shapiro-Davis administration restarted the Pennsylvania Office on Gun Violence Prevention. First question, what happened to the office that you had to restart it? And how was the office different from the commission, the Pennsylvania Commission on Crime and Delinquency?
Yeah, so the office was established, but it was never funded. So it never had the resources to create a staff to do the day-to-day work. So we funded that office. We hired a director. The Office of Gun Violence Prevention is housed within the Pennsylvania Commission on Crime and Delinquency. So the commission is still there. It is under the commission, and it is helping to drive the work of that commission in terms of gun violence prevention. It's also taking a whole of government approach. We have said this office should be working with our Department of Education, our Department of Health, our Department of Economic Development to look at all of the levers that state government has to prevent gun violence in our communities. And so many of that work, much of that work is just starting. We created an advisory council that's made up of many stakeholders here in Philadelphia, but across the Commonwealth. And so I think you will see a number of engagement sessions from them in the coming months ahead.
All right, thank you. Now, I want to step back to the federal government. Obviously, it's been in the news. There are federal, agents, have been dispatched to arrest people who are undocumented. National Guard has been sent to a handful of states to allegedly, crack down on crime, even in places where crime is already way down. What are your thoughts on what's going on at the federal level with regard to troops and agents?
Yeah, look, I think what we're seeing, quite frankly, at the federal level in that regard is disgusting. What they're doing is really theatrics, and they're not making communities safer. They're actually making communities less safe. And so luckily we have not seen that type of activity here in Pennsylvania, but as we've seen it play out in places like Chicago and LA, it has created a significant disruption, and it has forced people to the shadows who we need to work with law enforcement to make our communities safer. And so I don't think it's a productive strategy. I think there are things that the federal government could be doing to help curb violence in our community, like funding violence intervention and prevention programs, like delivering more resources to police officers. But the reality is they're not interested in actually making our community safer. They're interested in creating chaos.
Mm-hmm. And the recent federal government shutdown, were there any disruptions in public safety that you know of because of that?
No, not that I know. Not that I know of in terms of public safety. Most of our public safety apparatus is funded at the state level and was able to continue to operate within our own state budget impasse. So I did not. We have not. I don't think we've seen any of that from a public safety perspective.
Okay. Now I want to talk reach back and sort of talk about, but you as a public servant, you're 36 years old, okay, and that makes you the first millennial elected statewide,
Yeah.
okay, and you are also the first. Congratulations, by the way.
Thank you. Thank you. Millennials are taking over.
Yes, and you're also the first African American man to be lieutenant governor in Pennsylvania. Now, given that the majority of people who are impacted by gun violence are black men under the age of 40, does that inform your perspective on the issue, and has it factored into any of the policy decision making that you've done?
Yeah, I will tell you, I think no matter what community I go to in Pennsylvania, whether it's, a majority community of color or a majority white community, everybody wants that basic fundamental freedom of safety and security. And, to be clear, I've traveled all across Pennsylvania, and gun violence in general is not a Philadelphia problem. It's not a Pittsburgh problem. It's not even really a Pennsylvania problem. It's uniquely an American problem. And it's a problem that we can and must do something about. And so while I think this problem looks different depending on where you're at, in rural Pennsylvania, it's suicides. It leads many of the leading deaths there are gun violence related to suicides, and interpartner violence. Domestic violence is another huge topic that often doesn't get talked about. So this is a concern, I think, that really cuts along racial lines in many ways. The concern is just slightly different depending on where you're at. But from my personal perspective, this work started for me because I wanted to live in a community that was safe. And, as much as an honor as it is to be Pennsylvania's lieutenant governor, the biggest honor that I got in my life was 2 years ago when my daughter Harper was born. And I want her to live in a community where my wife and I don't have to fear when we drop her off at school, whether she's going to come home at night, whether she has to fear playing in her community, or that there's going to be an outbreak of gun violence. And so that's what really drives me to do this work every single day as an individual, because I want to leave this community better for my daughter and all the young people that are growing up now.
Okay, thank you. Now, you're from McKeesport, which is, for those who don't know, it's near Pittsburgh.
Yep.
Okay, it's like 3 or 4 hours from here.
Like 4.5, 5 hours from here.
It's a long way. It's not Eagles country, but anyway.
I root for the Eagles when they're not playing the Steelers.
Now, you mentioned that when you were young, growing up there, you started a gun violence prevention program as a teenager.
Yes.
Was there some specific incident that happened, or what made you want to do that?
Yeah, when I was 16 years old, I was at home, and I can very vividly remember there was a shooting on my street, and somebody got shot on the block that I lived on. That was the first time gun violence came to my neighborhood, and I can remember my mom running outside with towels to help this person, and that was the first time I saw somebody shot laying in the street in my neighborhood, and I remember feeling pretty helpless in that moment. And I remember thinking that nobody should have to live in a community where this is an everyday occurrence. Even if you are not directly involved as like a victim or a perpetrator of gun violence, if you live in a community with high rates of gun violence, you are a victim of gun violence. And even subconsciously, you make decisions to keep yourself safe, whether it's choosing not to walk down an alley or choosing not to leave your house past a certain time. And that's traumatizing for every person that lives in that community. And I thought, my parents always raised me, if there was a problem, you had to ask yourself what you were going to do about it. And so I wanted to do something about it. And there were luckily younger people in my community who wanted to do something about it. And elected officials who were willing to listen to young people who wanted to have a voice in their community to make it safer. And so that's what led me to join young people in my community, to start an organization, to create the Mayor's Youth Advisory Council, to create programs that kept young people out of harm's way and in safe environments. one of the saviors in my community was a Boys and Girls Club that many folks went to. And, one of the things I recognized when I got to state government is we didn't fund after-school programs or summer enrichment programs for young people. And I'm really proud of the fact that today I helped establish the Boost initiative last year, and we were able to continue it this year for $11.5 million to help fund after-school and summer enrichment programs for young people across Pennsylvania. And my hope is that we can continue to grow those efforts. Because when I think about when I was a young person, we had a Boys and Girls Club, a YMCA, we had summer programs for young people. And in today's environment, you look around, there are not programs like that often exist for young people. I just think in America, and the wealthiest country on earth, it's wrong to not have those opportunities for young people to allow them to live up to their fullest potential.
All right, thank you. Lieutenant Governor, a little bit later after McKeesport, you were working for the Allegheny County Executive, and during that time, you helped to create the Allegheny Department of Health. Mm-hmm. How has that department impacted Allegheny County?
So we helped create the Office of Violence Prevention in the Health Department to really look at gun violence from a public health perspective. And I'm really excited that was, probably over a decade, 15 years ago at this point. And that office is still working. I think they just drove out something like $70 million in grants to violence intervention programs in Allegheny County. It has had a tremendous impact locally. And, I was really lucky when I worked there that we had a Department of Health director who was really committed to looking at gun violence from a public health perspective, and that they have had subsequent administrations who've maintained that commitment. And so I think it's really been transformative on a number of levels, particularly for Allegheny County. And I think we have seen other governments across the Commonwealth take this approach as well.
Okay. Now, recruiting and training of police officers is paramount for the state, for every municipality in the state. Here in Philadelphia, there has been an officer vacancy rate that's been more than 1,000 officers for several years now. Unfortunately, we don't have anyone from the police department to talk to us about that. But I'll ask you, as the Lieutenant Governor, what has the Shapiro Davis administration done, or what can you do to help municipalities like Philadelphia find, recruit, and train, officers?
Yeah, this is an issue that we've started to address and have continued to address since we first got into office. We have literally spent, I think, between $30 and $40 million in recruitment and retention grants to municipalities to help them keep the police officers that they have, but also recruit more police officers to the force. We have seen, I think as a result, I don't want to quote a specific number, but I know we do know a number of how many police officers have been recruited to municipal roles since we've taken office. It's a pretty significant amount, but I recognize we still have a lot of work to do. We still have a lot of work, one, encouraging people to want to be police officers. We have a lot of work to do and making sure that officers are paid a salary that's respectable and that values the work that they do each and every day in our communities. The challenge of policing across Pennsylvania looks very different depending on where you're at. In Allegheny County, you have part-time police officers who do it for $17 an hour in some places, and then you have bigger departments like here in Philadelphia or the state police. But it's a similar problem that every police department is having, and resources and money is a big part of that. But also, the job of a police officer is really hard, and we have seen less and less people want to go into the profession.
Okay, so are you saying there's not much you can do with that?
No, I think we can continue to drive out resources to make sure wages are competitive and where they need to be. That is probably, I think, the biggest challenge when you're asking somebody to put on a uniform and put their life at risk. They look at a cost, and if it's, if you can make more money, doing something else, that's probably a little bit easier. Folks usually choose to do that. I think the other thing that we can do is invest in mental health supports, because oftentimes police officers are having to deal with mental health issues on these calls. And that's another area that we have been really proactive in terms of making investments. So I think all of those things will help us solve that problem. And we have seen some success over the last few years. I don't know how. I mean, it will take us a while to close that 1,000 officer number that you stated, but I think we are making progress, and we just kind of have to continue that work. And I think a lot of it starts with our young people, exposing them to police officers, encouraging them that a police officer is a noble field to go into, and getting them to view it in a different way.
Lieutenant Governor Davis, are there structural issues that are contributing to the flow of illegal guns into the state that you know of?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think the hodgepodge of, first, we need to pass common sense gun reform legislation in Harrisburg. That's number one. We've been trying to do that for a number of years, and the Pennsylvania House of Representatives was able to successfully pass those bills. But part of this is just a national conversation that has to happen, right? If we pass tougher laws, people are just going to sometimes bring guns in from Ohio and West Virginia and other states. And so, part of it is us doing our work here in Pennsylvania, but part of it is a national conversation that has to happen. And we have to continue to raise our voices. I think part of what has happened during the Trump administrations, many folks have just kind of given up on making a demand of President Trump and the Republicans in Congress because we don't think they'll move. But that shouldn't stop us from making that demand of those elected officials. I think particularly here in Pennsylvania, Senator McCormick, who represents all of you, could be a leading voice on this issue. I have not heard him say much on this issue in his time in office, but I am hopeful that he still has some time left and that we will get him to the right place on this issue.
All right. A handful of local places like Philadelphia and York have taken matters into their own hands with regard to passing laws or to deal with gun violence. In Philadelphia, for example, the city council banned gun switches and also ghost guns. They did the same thing in York. And Philadelphia also has passed legislation requiring gun stores to place signage in the stores warning people against straw purchasing. But these laws are vulnerable to the state's preemption law, which prohibits municipalities from passing their own gun restrictions, and there are lawsuits that have been filed with regard to all of these new laws that I've mentioned. How is the preemption law affecting gun violence in Pennsylvania, and where does the Shapiro administration stand on this law that Philadelphia has pointed to as being a hindrance to it passing, like you said, common sense gun laws?
Look, you got to win elections. That's just the reality of what has to happen here. We have 67 counties. Within those counties are hundreds of municipalities. It is probably unwieldy for each municipality to have their own regulation. We have to keep a majority in the Pennsylvania House and win a majority in the state Senate to pass common sense gun reform laws to make all of our communities safer. And Philadelphia has a big role in that. I think of Senator Joe Picozzi, who represents Northeast Philadelphia. He has a voice in this process. And so I don't necessarily think he has been on the right side of this issue. If you look at some Republican members, particularly in Montgomery and Bucks counties, there are going to be elections next year, and these elections have consequences. And there are clearly people who in Harrisburg don't want to see us pass common sense gun reform legislation because they're beholden to one interest or another. And we have to organize and make sure that we elect people who are going to do that. That's, in my view, that's the only way that this is going to get done.
Thank you. Just a point of order or clarity. Does that red number mean we're over limit here?
I have no idea. I've been looking at it. I have no idea what. Okay.
We're doing so good, I didn't know. But, all right. In the interest of order, since we are 3 minutes and 23 seconds over time, let me wrap it up, Lieutenant Governor Davis. What, you have about 3 years under your belt now?
Yeah, 3 years. We're going into our fourth year now.
All right. So after 3 years, what have you done that you are most proudest of?
Oh, I think, well, there are a number of things. One, reestablishing the Office of Gun Violence Prevention is probably one of my most important accomplishments. Creating the Boost Initiative for after-school programs is another huge accomplishment. The major investments that we've made in violence intervention and prevention grant programs is another huge accomplishment. I am really just so proud of the work that our administration has done on public safety in general. I think that'll be my most lasting mark on state government when I'm no longer in this role.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.